Lindsay had had a terrible day. In the middle of her workday at the cafeteria, her boss had called her to talk to her privately. Her continuous distractions and delays in her schedules had exceeded the owner's patience, so she had made a decision to fire her. Lindsay begged her for another chance, but the woman had given her many in the previous months, so she had made her decision definitively and would not change her mind. The young woman returned to her apartment with tears. She had very little money and no family help. Her parents had died in an accident years ago, and she lived alone in the city. She had to find a new job no matter what. When she arrived at the apartment where she lived with another girl, the day didn't get better either. Her partner was showing a girl their home. Lindsay asked her who she was, and her roommate replied that she was a new tenant. New tenant? But if there are only 2 rooms on this floor. Exactly, and your room will become hers. You haven't paid the rent for 6 months, and I'm fed up. This week, you leave the apartment. She had lost her job and her home. She had no way to pay her to avoid being kicked out of her own home. She only had to stay temporarily at her boyfriend's apartment. She stood at the door and rang the bell. Suddenly, a tall, smiling, young, blonde woman opened the door, wearing only one of her boyfriend's shirts. Seconds later, the young man left the room, unable to contain his surprise at having been caught red-handed. But Lindsay, weren't you working? That had to be a joke. It was impossible that everything could go so wrong. She left her boyfriend's apartment crying and sat in a cafeteria. She needed to go away. She didn't want to have to cross paths every day with all the people who had hurt her so much. She was alone. What could she do? She grabbed his mobile phone and wrote a post on her social network showing her anger and need for a job. If any of her contacts knew of a company that needed people, she might still be lucky. Not even 15 minutes had passed when a girl who had been her childhood friend wrote to her. She told her that she knew of a very good job opportunity and, above all, very well paid. She asked her to meet that same afternoon to talk about it in person. Lindsay had nothing to lose, and she would also appreciate being able to spend some time with a friend to let off steam. When her friend Jamie arrived, she was surprised to see her appearance. They hadn't seen each other for many years, and they both came from a very humble neighborhood and families. However, now Jamie was wearing expensive brand name clothes and shoes. Without telling her anything, she could guess that she wasn't doing badly at all financially. Lindsay was eager to know the details about the job her friend knew, and the young woman began to tell her what it was about. First of all, Lindsay, you must promise me that this conversation will be private. My bosses are very secretive about their personal lives, and they seek discretion. The young woman nodded. Well, I'm working for a family that has, a very high standard of living. But there is one thing they haven't been able to get, and that is a baby. The wife has a fertility problem, and they are looking for other options. They need a womb for another person to carry the embryo. In exchange, they offer a very generous offer. Her friend told her that if she was willing, her bosses would pay for the trip home and would provide her with accommodation throughout the process. Lindsay was shocked. She didn't know what the job would be about, but she had never imagined anything like this. Offering her body to give a baby to other people was a very serious thing. She asked her for time to think about it. It wasn't a simple decision. Jamie smiled at her and told her that there was no problem, but if she was interested, she recommended that she not take too long to give an answer. She was at the end of her vacation, and in 2 days she would fly back to her boss's house. If she wanted, she could fly together. Lindsay returned to her apartment, and when she arrived, she had all her items in cardboard boxes in the hallway. Her roommate had gone to the trouble of packing all her belongings, leaving her room free for the new tenant. Given the situation, she didn't think twice and sent Jamie a message confirming that she accepted the job. In 2 days, she flew to the city where her friend worked. When they arrived at the house, the young woman couldn't close her mouth in astonishment. The couple who wanted to hire her had a huge mansion. Her friend asked her to wait in the living room while she called her boss. Meanwhile, Lindsay dedicated herself to observing the objects that adorned the luxurious home. When she approached the photo frames, she discovered who the owner of that mansion was, a famous television actress. She had seen dozens of series where she appeared as a protagonist. Shortly, the woman entered. It was Sabrina Johnson. Sabrina greeted her with a big smile and they started talking. Shortly after, Sabrina's husband, Kevin, an important businessman who owns a large multinational, also arrived. The two began to talk to the young woman about their lives and their future baby. The woman pointed out that if Lindsay accepted, she had to sign a confidentiality contract, which would state that when the baby was born, he would be the legal child of the marriage. Without giving her much time to think and hesitate, the couple introduced her to the chef of the house. The young woman was surprised by the high lifestyle they had, since they even had a person hired just to cook for them, a young man who seemed very nice. After that, the couple showed her her room. They let her settle comfortably and the young woman was left alone with Jamie. Her friend explained that her job was something similar to that of an assistant. She managed certain of Sabrina's businesses and helped her in her day-to-day life. While Lindsay was putting her clothes in the closet, her friend told her that she should give her her cell phone. Lindsay didn't understand why she would be kept uncommunicated. However, Jamie explained that it was part of the confidentiality agreement. While she was the baby's surrogate, she had to maintain the family's privacy. Furthermore, she had practically no friends, no family, no partner. She was alone, so she wouldn't miss her phone. After signing a bunch of documents, Jamie told her that she could ask the cook to prepare something for dinner. The next day, they would begin medical tests for pregnancy. When Lindsay was left alone with James, the cook, she felt a great complicity. The young man asked her several times if she was sure about the big steps she was going to take, and she could only think that she had nowhere to live or with whom. She felt like she didn't have a future if she didn't earn money soon. So she confirmed that she was sure of her decision. While they were talking, she began to hear very loud screams in the background. It was Sabrina and Kevin. They were screaming at each other in an excessive way. She asked the cook if that was normal. Shouldn't they do anything? James remained silent and continued cooking while the screaming didn't stop. The next day, Lindsay began her doctor's appointments. First, many reviews, analyses, and then came all the others. Vitamins, supplements, diet instructions, and an appointment to start in vitro fertilization. The baby would be the couple's biological child, because Sabrina's egg would be used and James' sperm. Therefore, she would only act as a surrogate. The first days, it seemed like she was living a dream. Sabrina treated her as if they were best friends. She invited her to eat out, she took her shopping. She shared all kinds of plans with her. But everything began to change a few days after fertilization. The doctors had recommended they wait several weeks to find out the results. But Sabrina was impatient to find out if the treatment had worked. She told Lindsay to go get a test, and the young woman tried to make her understand that this would not be a real result. The doctors had given them other instructions, but Sabrina wouldn't take no for an answer, and violently grabbed her arm and dragged her to the bathroom and forced her to urinate on the test in front of her. With tears in her eyes, Lindsay did as she was told. But the worst came once the test indicated a negative pregnancy result. Sabrina was beside herself and started insulting her and telling her that she hadn't done things right. She accused her of taking advantage of her trust and her money. But Sabrina, I've done everything the doctors have recommended. This doesn't always work out the first time, it's not my fault. However, the woman looked at her with contempt and dragged her back to her room, throwing her on the floor. A few weeks later, Lindsay repeated the pregnancy test. Finally, she achieved her goal. She was pregnant. To her surprise, things didn't get better, but rather the rules were expanded for her. Sabrina passed a list of foods to the cook. She wouldn't be allowed to eat anything that was not healthy for the baby. Goodbye to having any candy or sweets. Besides, she couldn't go anywhere except with them or Jamie. At times, she felt like a prisoner. On one of the daily walks that she had to take accompanied by her friend, she confessed that she had doubts about whether the couple was capable of having the baby. Jamie didn't react well to her confession, accusing her that she had to be grateful for the large amount she would be paid for carrying a child in her womb for less than a year. She felt increasingly uncomfortable there, and the couple's marital situation wasn't improving either. Sometimes they were the most passionate lovers, and other times it seemed like they were going to end up killing each other. They argued in a very violent manner, especially when they had both been drinking a lot, throwing objects at each other, and one of them leaving the house for several days. Before the situation got even worse, Lindsay wasn't sure she made the right decision. That child was not hers. She knew that she had no right to decide after having signed the contract. But wasn't she partly to blame if she helped a child to be born in a family with such an unhealthy environment? One day, the fight had been so violent and terrifying that, scared, Lindsay took advantage of the moment in which they were yelling at each other to escape from the house. A fruit and vegetable delivery man had just stopped in front of the house next door. So while the man left some bags inside the neighbor's house, she took the opportunity to hide in the back of the truck, right behind several boxes of vegetables. She remained hidden long enough, and when she considered she was quite far from home, she came out of hiding and asked the delivery man to take her to a police station. She would tell everything. While waiting in the waiting room to be seen by an agent, she watched the news on television. Suddenly, her photo appeared on the screen. Sabrina and Kevin reported her disappearance and kidnapping of their son. They showed the pregnancy contract they had and accused her of fraud. She couldn't believe it. She had to get out of there. When she tried to escape, a police officer prevented her from leaving. They had registered her arrival and had notified the family that she was at the police station. Shortly after, Sabrina arrived at the office and asked the agents to take Lindsay home again, stating that it all had been a misunderstanding. And immediately afterwards, she took out a wad of bills from her purse and handed them to the police officers, who were guarding the young woman at the police station. When they arrived home, the woman accused her of having taken advantage of her and her husband's kindness and generosity, and she assured her that things would change from then on. She would no longer live in the same house and would enjoy the luxuries that until now were allowed to her. They would lock her in a windowless room in the pool house, where there was only a bed and darkness, and there she would stay all day, except for the mandatory daily walk for the baby's sake. On one of those walks, which she always had to take with Jamie, she asked her to help her. But the one who had been her friend had also betrayed her, siding with Sabrina and her husband. Lindsay couldn't believe she was so blind or so bribed by money to not help her. That couple were a couple of psychopaths and they were going to end her and the baby. Seeing that her former friend wasn't going to help her, Lindsay ran away again. But this time, she didn't get far. Sabrina and Jamie caught up with her quickly. When the young woman woke up, she was in a different place. She didn't recognize that room. It was wide. She tried to get up, but was suddenly scared to see that her hand was chained to the bed. Shortly after, Sabrina entered the room with tears in her eyes. She told her that Kevin had abandoned her forever. "I'm so sorry, Lindsay. I've tried to fix it, maybe too many times. He always promised me that he would change, and I believed him. I'm sorry that in the end you also found yourself involved in all our discussions. I'm sorry everything is going to be so difficult." Although she knew that Sabrina had also acted very badly in all those situations, the young woman couldn't help but feel sorry for the woman. She had been doubly unhappy with a husband who had not treated her well and dealing with the pain of not having been able to bring her own baby into the world. She grabbed her with the uncuffed hand, telling her that even though it was difficult, she trusted that she would be able to be a good mother. "Too bad we'll never know," Sabrina replied. "If Kevin and I are separated, the pregnancy must end. Remember, it's in the contract. Tomorrow we will go to the doctor." Lindsay started yelling at her that she couldn't do it. She was in the last weeks of pregnancy. That wasn't even legal. She couldn't kill that baby. The next day, Sabrina asked her assistant to pick Lindsay up to go to the medical center where they would terminate the pregnancy. When Jamie entered the room, the pregnant woman implored her to please take her to a hospital. She was bleeding and Sabrina wanted to kill the baby. She approached the door to call her boss and tell her what was happening when suddenly she changed her mind and decided to help the young woman. She removed her handcuffs and secretly took her through the house to try to get out without being seen. She helped her get into the car and they ran to the nearest hospital. When Sabrina heard the sound of the engine, she ran into the room to see what was happening. Her assistant had betrayed her. She had to reach them before it was too late. While driving, Jamie apologized for all the time she hadn't helped her. Sabrina blackmailed her with her mother's health, who had been diagnosed with a very serious illness and required very expensive treatment. The famous actress offered to pay for everything as long as she was her faithful assistant. If she betrayed her, her mother's health would be in danger. Everything she had done had been to help her. Suddenly, they felt a rear bump on the car. It was Sabrina who had caught up with them, causing the car to stop. The woman got out of the car and, pointing a gun at her, forced them to get out as well. Lindsay cried, imploring her to think about the baby. "Do you think I care about the baby? I don't care what happens to him. He should disappear. He and you have been a mistake." That's when Lindsay saw it clearly. That baby wasn't Sabrina's. They had used one of her eggs and fertilized it. They didn't have any genetic material from the woman. The baby she was carrying was really hers. Jamie took advantage of the moment to hit her on the arm and throw the weapon to the ground. She managed to pick it up before the woman and pointed it at her, threatening her. "Grab my phone, Lindsay, and call the police and the ambulance. She won't hurt you again." Sometime later, Sabrina was exposed and blamed for several crimes. Meanwhile, Lindsay was having an emergency delivery and met her son, the little boy who had suffered so much to be born and be by his mother's side forever. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it. And if you want to see more Draw My Life videos, subscribe to our channel. See you in the next episode.